So we thought what we do today is I have some questions prepared that I'm going to ask Deb to get her talking about the theater, her life in the theater, why the theater matters, why it should matter, and then we'll have some time for any questions from the audience as well. But I wanted to start with this one just because of the context of this class. This is Theater 100. It is an arts option in the general education requirements for Penn State students. It's one of a handful of courses they can take to fulfill their requirement for a course in the arts. So almost all of the students here today are actually studying toward careers in fields other than theater. Do we have any theater majors in here? I think visiting we have a couple, yeah. And in section 2, I actually think we have 2 theater majors. They take it in the fall. So these are all students from across the university, from College of Business, Engineering, Science, Technology, etc. And so my question is for you to help them understand why the theater should be part of their lives as they move forward.
I am one of those people, Bill, who thinks that the theater is the answer to everything. To start out as digressive as I always am, I had this chiropractor. This chiropractor, she didn't crack your bones. She just kind of went like this with crystals. I don't know what she was doing, but whatever it was, it worked. She would just go like this, and then everything was better for you. When I was pregnant, and I was in my 10th month with this person who has sublet my apartment in this way and has taken up the whole space. And I was like, I really needed him to evacuate. It was time for him to do that, but he just didn't feel like it. I called Ellen, the chiropractor, and I said, Ellen, help me with your whatever it is you do. I'm in my 9th month, 10th month. The person is just having a cigarette under a streetlight, and I'd like him to evacuate. She said, no problem. Just come, and I will help you. So my husband drove me to the city, and I lay on her table. She had a table that opened up for your big, fat self. And I lay on the table, and she took the thing and went like this, and whatever she did. She said, you'll be in labor momentarily. My husband drove me home, and we pulled into the carport, and I opened the door, and I felt this pain. It starts in the back. It comes around the front like hot fingers of fire. Bingo, Ellen. I ran into the house. I was so awestruck that this woman was able to do this. And I said, Ellen, you're a genius. I'm in labor. And Ellen says, that's chiropractic. That's how I feel about theater, dear friends. For me, the theater is the answer to everything. Going through life, the most generous thing we can do for each other is to see each other. I am at a point now in my life, because I'm ancient, when I look at you and I see you, I see you. When we see each other, we do each other the greatest honor. Life is very short, it's very sweet, it's very full, and the theater is the place where we go to see each other. We go to stare at people in the theater. I'm fond of saying, you go to the theater to stare at people, which is not something you can do just anywhere. People have guns in my community, in the tri-state area. You go to the theater to stare at people. No one's going to say, what are you looking at? You pay for your money, you sit down, the lights go down, the lights come up on the stage, and there is humanity spread out in front of you. You stare at these people's bodies, you evaluate their morals and their intellectual capacity, you compare yourself to them, you think about the society you live in. For the actor, it makes out of a community of people a concerned group of witnesses. And everyone leaves the theater carrying the imagery that the actor, that the playwright has put before them. This is a sacrament, and it is redemptive and healing both for the audience and for the actor. I can't think of an art form that does this better. Additionally, theater is of the body. When you go to the movies, it's fun. You hold hands with someone, you have a popcorn. But there's no people there on the screen. It's just a digital thing or a rolling thing. When you go to the theater, the people are there. Like when I go to the theater, I feel like I have a date with the actors. I try to dress decently, which as you can see is not my strong point. My director, this is a tea cozy dress, I call it. I wore it for him because he loves it so much. Not. But the people are there. It's in the flesh. It takes place live. Anything can happen. It's like life. You know, the person could die. The person could come into the audience and try to make love to you. Anything could happen. It usually doesn't. But it could. So this is...
Last class, I had people feel a BB in my head. I don't think
See?
anyone expected that I'd
When
walk
I was-
out there and say, do you want to feel the BB in my head?
Well, as long as we're talking like that. In Tel Aviv, where my play was translated into Hebrew, my play Critical Mass, which is about the impulse to criticize people. Have you noticed that people can't wait to tell you what's wrong with your shirt, your face, your blouse, your telephone manner, your parenting style? People would pay to do it. So I wrote a play about criticism, about the impulse to criticize, which is sometimes very elevated and sometimes very base, and all points in between. And I was inspired to write this play because I was playing with my little boy, my son. He's very attractive. My kids do not look like me. I'll be talking about my son in my show, which I hope you come see. And I was playing with him on the front lawn when this woman drove by who didn't think very well of me. She was the neighbor of my mother across the street. She comes driving by in her Mercedes, whatever it is, and she looks out the window and says, "Is that your son?" And I said, "Yes. He's 2.5. And she said, "He's beautiful." And I said, "Thank you." I don't usually say thank you when people compliment the appearance of my children. It had nothing to do with me. I just carried them around. They sublet my apartment. That's the end of it. But in this case, I said thank you because she noticed me. She was not a person who did that. She saw me. It's like someone says, "What a nice sunset." And I said, "Thank you." It has nothing to do with me. But I thanked her because she saw me. "Thank you," she said. So she said, "He's beautiful," and I said, "Thank you." And then she looks at the boy, looks at me, looks back at the child, and says, "You know, God is good that a woman who looks like you could have a child who looks like that." Now that's funny. You can't even take that personally. That is just psychotic. So I realized
It is psychotic.
I started laughing so hard, I fell down on the grass laughing. It was so funny. Anyway, I wrote a whole play came out of it, and then it was sold out at PS 122. So she says, "I need a ticket." She calls up and says, "I'm the God is good lady." She was very proud. Anyway, why am I talking about that? I'm talking about that. There's a reason why I'm talking about that.
I don't know, my BB in the head
Oh, yes.
launched it
So we're
for
in
you.
Tel Aviv. Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
So we're in Tel Aviv with this play, Critical Mass, the one about God is good. And Mary in the manger has Jesus, and a woman comes into the manger and says that to her, but that's okay. In Tel Aviv, people lined up to feel my ass. Not because it's any good, but because it lacks muscle texture. If anybody's interested later, you can come down here. Like, no matter what I do, my ass just doesn't muscle up. Like, I was on point. I was a dancer. I danced. You know, it just didn't matter. The damn thing has no texture at all. But anyway.
So I'll let you feel my BB if you let me
Hey,
feel your
okay,
ass.
hey, listen, I'll show you mine if you'll
All
show
right.
me yours.
So, speaking of asses and BBs in the head, I want to talk a little bit more about the body in the theater because it's so important to you and to your work. Because your body of work literally is from your personal history, your biographical history, the history of your children, the history of your family. So much of your work is from literally and metaphorically from your body. And that has made you a story maker, a storyteller, a story weaver, all of those things. So talk about, just because I would love for them to hear this story, that your first solo performance and that the problem that you confronted as a woman who wanted to be present on the stage in that way.
Just speaking about the body and about the personal nature of work in the theater, I realized at the very beginning of my life writing for theater that fiction is the redistribution of autobiography. That somebody writes a novel, somebody writes a play, somebody writes a poem. It's always autobiographical. The question, is this autobiographical, is not really, it's not a sensible question. The question is, in what way is this autobiographical? Because we don't have anything but ourselves from which to work. We have our imagination, we have our fantasies, our memories. Memory itself is a novelist. We have those things we're interested in, we have the research we're compelled to do. It all comes from us. I think it's kind of solipsistic to think we have anything but ourselves from which to work in a way. Anyway, I fell into the theater in a way, in an accident that felt really planned by fate. I think if you get yourself ready to live your life, life will come and get you, if you're prepared. I always loved language. It seemed like the only way you could reasonably scream for help. So I tried to perfect my language as best I could. I always liked to write, and so I ended up in a story that I won't take up the time right now telling, writing for a theater company that I ended up becoming a founding member of called Split Britches Theater Company. Split Britches was and remains a feminist theater company that really opened up my sense of possibility. After I had seen several different women's theater companies performing without apology, women who didn't look like the classical soap opera blonde, which it needs no explanation, I do not look like that. I saw several theater companies beginning to make room for women's bodies and women's voices in the theater. And when the opportunity opened to write for these women, I ended up writing for them, and the next thing I knew I was in their play, and the next thing I knew I was touring Europe with this feminist theater company, and I became the resident writer in that company. A couple years into that experience, Ellie Covan from Dixon Place, where Dr. Doan's play Drifting, his beautiful play, just had an incredible performance. This woman called me and said, "Would you like to do a solo work at my theater?" And I said, no. And she said, "Well, would you like to do this on the 17th or the 29th? So I said, "Well, okay, the 29th. And then I had to figure out what to do. Now, I had always wanted to play Hamlet. I was obsessed with Hamlet. There's a joke on my campus that I wrote that play, and I feel like I did. And if you do that play, you send me $60 royalty. That goes for everybody here. I always wanted to play Hamlet. When I was 13 and just started menstruating, that's what I wanted. Other girls wanted a frou-frou or a hoo-ha. I wanted to play Hamlet. I was obsessed with the Hamlet. And was growing into the realization that no one was going to cast me, this weird-looking Jewish lady, to play Hamlet. Who's going to hire me to do that? And so now I've promised this woman that I'm going to come and do a solo show at her theater. I'm a member of a feminist theater company. I'm struggling with issues of women's rights to be on stage, of women's bodies on stage, of what is asked of a woman's body when the lights come up and there's a woman standing there. And I have my aching desire to play Hamlet. One of the things I learned in my theater company, Split Britches, was that you do what you want. Theater of desire, folks. When you get on stage and you do what you want, you reveal everything human about yourself. We go to the theater for the revelation of humanity, to see people, to stare at people. That's why we go. And when you reveal yourself, your humanity, you say something about the whole human condition. So what I decided to do was to do the to be or not to be speech from Hamlet. But I was dressed in a bathing suit with a banner that said Miss Tennessee, And I had fishnet stockings and high heels. I can barely walk in these boots, much less high heels. And I had a tiara and a banner that said Miss Tennessee. And I was doing the to be or not to be speech in the combined bathing suit and talent competition. So I came out on the stage like this and showed my boobs and my butt. And then it's to be or not to be. That is the question. And then I showed my boobs again and my butt. Whether 'tis nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows. And I went on in this demented manner. And I had a friend planted in the audience. So you know that speech, whether 'tis nobler, da-da-da, for who would bear this, that, and the other thing, when he might his quietus make with a thingamabob? Who would fardels bear to grunt and sweat under a weary life, but that the fear of something after death? And my friend stands up in the audience and screams, the dread! And now this woman's horrified. She screwed it up. But that the dread, it took her 10 seconds to get her composure. But that the dread of something after death. So it wasn't until 2 years later that I realized what I had done with this piece. What I had done was not only do the Hamlet, which I was dying to do, but enact with it the reasons why nobody would cast me or give me the right to do it. Those two things were happening at once. And that's the power of performance as opposed to theater with a capital T. In the theater with a capital T, we are honored when someone says, oh, I didn't even recognize you. That was you playing King Lear? I would never have known it was you. In performance with a capital P, we like to be seen. There are a series of transparent layers between the character and the actor. It's kind of like a hand puppet that's translucent. So you see not only the character, but the hand that's moving it. You see two things at once. It's a conversation between the character and the actor going on in which inheres the meaning of what's being done. So that was my first solo piece. Apart from Reno's show, I had this friend, Reno. We did this piece called Couple of Weirdos. For years we did it. This music would play da-da-da-da-da-da, there's no business. Like we were handcuffed together. Reno just insulted people all the time. So we would come in handcuffed together, da-da-da-da-da-da, there's no, I had bruises up and down my arm because she's yanking on this handcuff. You don't do that. Da-da-da-da-da-da, there's no business. And she would start insulting people and I would apologize. I don't know why I'm talking about a couple of weirdos. There was a reason. Oh, yes. Reno had this comedy show. The first time I ever stood alone on stage, Reno had this comedy show. I would go to Reno's comedy show, and people were howling with laughter. This was at the old Wow on First Street. I had no idea why they were laughing. I did not get the jokes. Now, I am no Margaret Dumont. Do you know who she was? You probably don't. In the Marx Brothers movies, she was this portly woman who, she was so funny because she didn't get the jokes. She thought the Marx Brothers movies were operas of great seriousness. She did not understand, with no singing, she did not understand that these were funny. That's how I felt. I didn't get the jokes at Reno's comedy show. And then she said, would you like to do 5 minutes at my comedy show? I was like, 5 minutes? 5 minutes? That's like forever. But I said yes, not one to back away from a challenge. And I'm thinking, what am I going to do for 5 minutes standing there alone as I am right here in front of you? So I decided what I was going to do was, back then, you can shut me up, Bill, if you want. Back then, there was the Village
Wait, give me
Voice.
some back then. This was
1982.
So most of them weren't even
No,
born
no,
yet.
you weren't. There was nothing.
This is
about
ancient
you.
history in the
Okay.
1980s. Big hair, rock
Yeah,
anthems.
So the Village Voice is this publication you must have heard of in New York. And back in that day, it was a substantive magazine. Right now, it's just an advertisement for a whorehouse. Excuse me, I'm just telling you the truth. It's like, how do you get your thing done behind the thing? But back then, they had award-winning writers and serious articles, and they won like Pulitzer Prizes for their incisive coverage. But they had an advertisement they ran on the radio. I have to tell you, it was nuts. I'm not making this up. This isn't a comedy act. It went, this advertisement was a jingle. It went da 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 da, and it's coming at you in the Village Voice. Like, and that was the headline, whatever the headline was that week, and it's coming at you in the Village Voice. And the thing was that they would drop the headline in even when it was grievously inappropriate to the tone of the music. I remember this one that when 7 nuns were murdered down in Nicaragua, and it's coming at you in the Village Voice. I mean, they would, no matter what, they would just drop the headline in there. At the time, I was living on 21st Street and First Avenue in this 6-story walk-up apartment. You started at 0. I'm serious. And it was this tenement, and you know, the cockroach situation was real, real bad. When you turned on the light, the wall moved like you had just come into someone else's space. It was grievous. And I mean, on any given day, you know, I was like, oh God. But sometimes it was very, very upsetting. And one day I came home and I turned on the light, and this massive crowd of creatures and I became incensed. And I just grabbed a newspaper, rolled it up, and I start killing these things, like homicidally killing them. And then I realized my apartment is filled with disgusting roaches, and I'm coming at them with the Village Voice. So, I mean, this is basically the 5-minute story that I told at Reno's Comedy Hour. So that was really the first time I stood alone on stage, but when I was really given a performance, it was Hamlet, and it was the theater of desire that I was beginning to discover and define for myself.
You talk a lot about the theater of desire, which is great, and you know it's influenced me. Your ideas about that and how that happens have been a big influence on me. And it seems to me that that's also a concept that applies to whether you're making theater or not, right?
Yes.
Your life is your theater of desire. Can you talk a little bit about that, especially, again, given that we have a room full of students who won't be working in the theater. Hopefully they'll be paying to go see the theater for the rest of their lives.
You don't know.
Being patrons.
There's going to be some people in here that are going to end up in the theater.
Or in the film industry.
There are going to be some people here.
But even that notion of your life as a theater of desire, talk about that.
Well, you know, I believe in doing what you want. I feel passionate that regret is erosive. It eats away at the soul. I believe that if what you desire, it does not harm you and it does not harm anyone else, you should do what you want. Live your life on that level. And in the theater, this has particular resonance because, as I've said, I really feel like when you reveal your humanity in a very particular way, you shed light on everything human. And I have found that desire is my best editor. It's like, what do I want to say? If I'm just talking because I think I should, if I'm just working from an idea, someone will commission me to write something about 3 men who fought for liberty in Mauritania or something. It's not going to get me through the hump of trying to create. But when I'm speaking because I desire to speak, that's when I'm resonant, truthful, and original. And that is true of all our endeavors in life. It is very hard to deal with the pressures of education, the pressures we feel from our parents, the morals and ethics we wrestle with all the time. I have found that my impulses, my desire is the most truthful space from which to work. And I trust it, and I live my life that way. I'm often asked by students in the circle, what is your biggest regret? And I struggle to answer the question because in terms of the choices I've made, I have learned to trust my desire and to do what I want, both in the theater and in the other parts of my life. And I commend you to your own instincts about what will bring joy to your spirit.
And how can students, all of us, me included, how can we think of our lives as stories that are worth telling? Like when you sit down you use prompts, you use lots of different techniques to get your juices flowing, automatic writing, the things that you do. But it seems to me that connected to that is your understanding of your life as a story, the lives of your children as stories, the lives of people you meet.
Yes.
How can you help us think about our lives as stories that are worth telling, which will then make us reflect on our lives a little differently?
Well, especially for young people, it's hard to think, oh, what do I have to say? Oh, my life is not extraordinary. Oh, I grew up in a regular house on a regular place, or who am I and what is the meaning? What might I have to contribute to the human conversation? There is not a person I've met who is not capable of educating me on the deepest level. That if I had the honor of spending time here, I would be honored to meet with every single person in this room and ask you a million questions about your life, your feelings, your choices, your struggles, your grievance, your grief, your loss, your love, the thing that lights you up and makes you want to go on living. Every single one of these stories is profound and compelling. I believe this truthfully. It's very hard for young people to believe they have something to contribute to the human conversation. I can tell you my two-year-old daughter has educated me. My daughter's like oracular. She's an oracle. I've only met one person who I felt like I had nothing to learn from, and that's because she wasn't living a truthful life. So nothing she said was particularly truthful. It is very rare that there is an individual her life would have been interesting, she just wasn't capable of expressing it. I offer you yourself in the most sacred way. And it is hard for young people to realize the extent to which their lives have artistic resonance and spiritual resonance. And there isn't a person without that. That's my view. And, automatic writing, as you mentioned, I believe in the practice of automatic writing. Automatic writing, what is it? It's what it sounds like. It's just dropping down and writing every day. You just drop down and you just write. It doesn't matter what you write. The only thing that matters is that you write without stopping, without editing, without reading what you've written, without crossing anything out to correct your spelling, your grammar. We all have a critic who sits with us saying, you're not good. That's not interesting. It's boring. It's not original. Whatever you just said, it's already been said, and everybody knows that, and it's self-indulgent. And what if my mother sees this? Nobody cares about this. After a few minutes of automatic writing, this inner critic, who is a shallow and boring person, goes for a beer and leaves you alone in this corridor of rich, resonant thought that you did not know you were going to have. You remember your Uncle Mordecai. Like, who the hell is that? Like, you haven't thought about him in 30 years, even though you're only 19 or whatever you are. So that is a practice that really does help you reflect on your life and the images that fill it.
So this is really off script completely, but I'm gonna, if I can, put you on the spot for just a second, because for them, and write these down. Dev gave a great workshop the other day to some theater students, and she has a series of prompts that she gave them to help lead them toward some automatic writing. So I'm going to ask her to maybe just give you 2 or 3 of them that you could use to start this kind of process of thinking about yourself, your story, and to drop down into some writing that could be good for you. Can we do that?
Sure.
I have my little green notebook
it's
where
good.
I wrote them
It's
all
good.
down if you
I'll just...
yeah. Throw them out too. Give them a few.
Here's one. So what happens is I say a sentence that has a blank at the end, and you, when you're doing your automatic writing, you fill in the blank and just keep writing. It doesn't matter where it takes you. Write for 5 minutes in the beginning. This is bar work. This is the bar work of life. It's like if you're a swimmer, you need to swim laps. This is a consciousness bar work, like the ballerinas, they do their rond de jambes at the bar. This is what that is for consciousness. It's very helpful. So here's one. Everything changed when someone touching me for the first time would probably think, gee. After death, there's probably I want to dance with, that's a proper name goes in there, not like with abandon or something. That's a person goes in there. My inner life is narrated in a voice that
Maybe one more, and then we'll take some questions from them too.
maybe one more. There's God, there's sex, there's death, and there's
That's a good one. Yeah, my mind started running on that one immediately. Yeah.
chocolate's a big answer sometimes.
There's chocolate in between, right? So we have a few minutes to take some questions, a couple of questions from y'all before we have to wrap up. So who's got a question they'd like to ask Deb? And pretty much nothing is unanswerable to Deb. She's willing, personal, professional, she's willing to talk and share whatever you are curious about. So who wants a question?
Would you write anything with regards to your work? What time of your life do you draw mostly from?
I have found material really the past 23 years. Having kids, I have found that I got a lot more prolific once I had kids because I didn't have any time, so I had to realize that I was working all the time, no matter what I was doing. And something about the new love I felt for these children deepened my sense of what love meant in general. So I would say the past 20 years of my life have been the most generative, but you know, there hasn't been a lot of images from high school, from what my body felt like in high school. You know what? I draw from the whole. There isn't a time in my life that I don't find material I can draw from, images and thoughts. So thank you for asking. It's the whole thing's open. My mother used to say she didn't want to talk to me because everything she say ended up in a play, and that's true. That was true. Now my daughter's a playwright. Everything I say ends up in her plays. Well, I'm not sure of what the particulars are that you're asking about. I can certainly, I am a person who really doesn't, I believe if you can see it, you can have it. I believe that desire has power and agency and gets things done. I believe that desire attracts its own object, not through mystical means, but through action. If I want something, my actions get oriented towards making that happen. And I have truly not found a place where that hasn't been true or possible. When it comes to theater, I'm scrappy. This may be a metaphor that is useful to you, and it may not, because I don't know the particulars of your life. But if no one will do my play, I'll just get my friends to do it. If I can't find a theater, we'll just do it in someone's garage. I don't take no for an answer. I work because I work. I just want to work, and I will do it. I have a lot of very artistic friends who have grown bitter because nobody would play their tuba piece, or Nobody would give them da-da-da. I don't wait for people to give me stuff. That's not a life that I was capable of living. If I want to do something, I find a way to do it. It's like, how can I get this done? I don't give up. I'm relentless. I fought mortal illness because I'm just relentless. I don't give up easily. And that's really everything. I believe that desire has power and agency, and it gets things done. And if there are things that you desire, if there are things that you want, you can work your way by visualizing around obstacles towards that thing. I truly believe that. Without knowing the particular nature of your struggle, that's the clearest answer I can give, but it's a truthful answer.
Great. Yeah.
We talked a lot about how there's a lot of criticism and a lot of people out there who are ready to criticize you right away. So I guess my question would be, how did you build up your resilience in the theater with both with being criticized for your plays and being criticized while you're on stage, both in the way you acted on stage and your look and all that stuff? How did you build up your character resilience in theater for that?
I am very careful who I talk to about my work in its earliest stages. I've got a few people. One of them is Jay Wall, who's honored us by being here today. I have a few friends who are brilliant, who wish me well, and who are really smart about work in the theater. I don't, I'll work with my friend Ray, and she says, we welcome feedback, and I will say, Ray welcomes feedback. I don't just ask strangers to tell me what they think, but they can't wait to do it, and some of them will do it anyway. So initially, I close ranks around the work and talk to really smart people whose opinions I know and trust, who wish me well, who are not going to say anything that isn't meant to lift me up and support me, and who know how to talk to a writer. I have learned how to talk to writers and actors. To tell somebody that something sucks, there's no information in that. It's not helpful. They just want to open up a Sabret hot dog stand and forget the whole thing. When you tell somebody what's right with their work, that's where there's information, even if it's only one thing. I learned that from the best professor I had in college. He would take a piece of garbage I wrote and circle the one decent image in it. I was like, oh, I see. So I learned to be careful who I talk to. Once a play's out there and people are going to write about it, you just do the best you can. If somebody doesn't like it, trashes your work, okay. Life is short. I'm doing what I want. Thank you for your kind consideration of my work. Bite me. That's it.
One last question. We have time for one more. Yes, sir.
Going back to desire, given the career that you've had already, what do you plan on doing next? Like, what are your desires from here on out? Like in terms of theater and like what you want to do. Like you've already done Hamlet. That's what you wanted to do. You've written plays and stuff. What are you going to do now?
Well, I'm working on a new play for my daughter. It's a gift to my daughter. It's based on this character. I play all these characters. There's always been these demented characters that I play. And when I raised my sister in Ding-a-ling-a-ling-land, which was this make-believe world that was a telephonocracy. There was a king, but he was a figurehead, and the board of directors of the phone company was actually the government. And I played her husband and 25 of his brothers, and she just played herself. Then when I had my own children, Ding-a-ling-a-ling-land continued with new characters. And one of these characters is a woman named Myrtle Schmidt. She's both a pastry chef and a high-powered corporate attorney. And she wears high heels and lame evening gowns, and she sleeps in pajama high heels. And I'm writing a play about her because my daughter wants to play her. So I just spent a wonderful week working on the Myrtle Schmidt play, and I'm hoping to get that play together. I'm doing the play that I have the honor of presenting here at Penn State is going up at this wonderful theater in April. I hope I have another play, Turquoise, that I think is going up in June or July. That's in honor to my parents. And I am hoping to work on the Myrtle Schmidt play. I just want to be helpful. I want to be of service, and I want to make theater because I'm in love with it. That's all. My life is, I want to keep doing what I'm doing.
Great. So we're just about out of time. A quick reminder that the Top Dog Underdog quiz goes live tomorrow at 5 o'clock. Don't forget. Can we give a special thanks? Look, I want you to know.
Thank you, guys. Thanks to you. Thanks to you, Bill.